atomic gigantification was a sweeping Japan nation when along came a dude with an ultra attitude, a Kamen Rider who's the greatest kicker of Japan. And of all, man, life's too short now, baby, to not talk big now, baby.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to a new episode of Kaiju Conversation. I'm your host, Elijah, and today I have a very exciting special interview for you. I wish I could introduce him as well as I think I could, but this is a man of many talents, so I'm going to let him introduce himself and just give a rundown of just all the amazing things he does.
Oh, wow.
So the floor is yours.
Thank you. My name is Tarrell. I'm a filmmaker, editor from Iowa. I've been making movies since I was about 11, which is about 2007, to give an idea of how old I am. And yeah, huge Godzilla fan. Always been a huge Godzilla fan, but never really had the abilities to pull it off. But with technology these days, it's possible. So I've been diving head into Godzilla the last few years.
Now, okay. I'm curious, where did your love for not only just giant monsters and kaiju, but where did your love of film start?
That's a good question. My family has always just loved movies. Like, that was always kind of rent a movie from Blockbuster, get the family around the TV. Like, that was always kind of like a tradition in the household. So I always had a love for movies. Filmmaking itself, I didn't really get into until Peter Jackson's King Kong. Because they put out this like special features DVD and it had like 6 hours of pretty much them going through every process of making the movie. So that was kind of like film school for me. And I was like, oh, you can actually do this as like a job, you know? So that's kind of when I started pursuing it. But yeah, I've always loved movies. I've always been in front of the TV.
So out of curiosity, and this is kind of one of those basic questions, but it's a good way to kind of get a grasp of what your type of film is. What are some of your favorite films or giant monster movies?
I was afraid this question would be asked because I have so many, it's hard to choose. I'd say, Godzilla is my main guy. I do love Kong. That Peter Jackson one especially. I always say it's my favorite movie of all time just because it's the one that got me into filmmaking. But as for Godzilla, I'm a really big, Showa and Heisei type of guy. Space Godzilla, I love Destroya. The original King Kong versus Godzilla, I think, is the first one I ever saw. And that one I still, like, it's obviously cheesy, it has its age, but it's just so good. I love it. The fights, it's all so good. So yeah, I always hate choosing favorites because I'm afraid I'll listen back and I'll be like, why didn't I say this one?
Hey, I said some, so you can list off as many as you want.
That's true. Yeah, if I had to choose one from like each era, I guess. God, it's even still hard doing that. I'd say probably Terror of Mechagodzilla. Then I'd probably say Destroya. Then Godzilla, Mothra, King Ghidorah, Giant Monsters All Out Attack. You got to say the full title every time. And then between the newer ones, between Shin and Minus One, I probably would say Minus One is my favorite.
I'm a full-fledged fan of Terror of Mechagodzilla. That was my first Godzilla movie. I love it.
It's so good.
So the grasp I was able to get there is you have great taste in film.
Thank you.
Because
I try.
I'm one of those fans now. Granted, it's been a long time since I've watched it, but to me, Peter Jackson's King Kong is the best King Kong. I love that movie.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, I'll watch the extended edition. Mm-hmm. People complain it's too long. I'm like, bring me more. Like, I'm all in.
Now, of course, a lot of your work that listeners of the show and, the fandom, they know your kaiju work, but more so than that, you've done other stuff. You have a Spider-Man fan film. You have a plethora of science fiction and horror short films. So what inspiration from monster movies or from other films helped you develop your style of filmmaking?
That's a really good question. Um, hmm. Yeah, I mean, I always have like my favorite directors, even though their work doesn't really. You wouldn't see how like Tarantino's one of my favorites. My stuff is not at all like Tarantino's, so you probably don't feel like that cross connection. But I am a really big fan of directors that have, a style. Like you're watching this movie. And again, Peter Jackson's King Kong, that was definitely one. I'm a big John Carpenter fan. He just the way he takes concepts and doesn't try to get too intellectual with it. Like he just does what it is and it's great. I'd say those are probably some. In the Godzilla world, Gareth Edwards was definitely a huge inspiration. Absolutely love the way he films monsters. He's probably, with my visuals, he's probably the one director I rip off the most. Just the way he positions stuff in frame, I absolutely love. And then, of course, the big guys like Spielberg, love him. Jaws is one of my favorite movies. So it's definitely a mix of directors for sure.
Okay, so you mentioned John Carpenter, and while I was going through your website, and under your gallery, you've got a still image, and I didn't get to watch the short that it's from, but it is of a character silhouetted by backlighting with fog around it. Okay, so my favorite John Carpenter film is The Fog.
Oh, nice.
So, what Carpenter films do you draw inspiration from, out of curiosity?
Yeah, my favorite of all time is The Thing. I actually had action figures from it as a kid, which is kind of messed up in hindsight, like the head crab and everything. But I just love how gross it is. The characters are great. Yeah, so that's probably my favorite.
Okay, that's a good one. That one's good. I love Escape from New York. I think is another one of his amazing films. I love how atmospheric his directing style is.
Yeah, like I said, that Big Trouble in Little China also just has excellent atmosphere, great effects. Yeah, no, his stuff is always a fun time to watch.
Now, outside of just kaiju and giant monsters, you mentioned The Thing and a little bit of Carpenter and Jaws. What are some other films that you either love or kind of you were inspired by to go out and pursue filmmaking?
I'd say next to Godzilla, the next thing I'm probably like a huge fan of is the Karate Kid series, especially Cobra Kai. I absolutely love it. And martial arts films in general, like I love. Let's see, aside from that, I'm also a Pixar kid, so I always love going back to those. Especially the first Toy Story. That's one of those movies I can just I memorize it down to like the sound effects when they come. Like I just know that movie front and back. But yeah, I do like dramas and stuff too. And even just stuff that's like not an epic scale. Like Napoleon Dynamite is one of my favorite movies. So honestly, as long as it has good characters, I'll probably be into it in some way.
Okay, that's a good way to summarize it. So growing up, were you interested at all in filmmaking? Like, were you shooting like little home movies with like action figures or anything like that? Or when did you really see that birth of that creativity from you?
Yeah. As far as the creativity, I originally wanted to be a comic book artist. So I would draw a bunch of Godzilla books and all that. But I quickly kind of realized like that was just not my there's people like in my class that were like crazy talented. And I'm like, okay, so maybe not that. But then yeah, after I saw that Peter Jackson making I got this like VHS camera for my birthday. And the first thing I actually remember filming on it was this burning Godzilla action figure I had. It was just like over his shoulder. And then it would like cut to my stepdad like, oh, like what's that? Up there. And like, that was some of like the first stuff I ever filmed. And yeah, I love those days of like the early days of being a kid and a filmmaker. Because it was even before YouTube. Or YouTube was just now coming out. So yeah, there's just a great freedom. I loved making movies as a kid. Just getting like the neighborhood kids involved in it. That was always fun.
So, okay, your first camera was a video cassette camera. And this is jumping ahead, but you have a series that you've kind of started. Got the Monster Project, correct?
Project
Monster.
Yeah.
There we go.
Yeah.
And that is, it's 4.3 aspect ratio.
Yeah.
And from what I can tell, it's kind of got a VHS-esque filter over it. Is that kind of a love letter to your beginnings?
Yeah, a little bit. And I've just loved VHS in general. Like, there's still some Godzilla movies I prefer to watching VHS, especially the older ones. Like, there's just, like, I have that Criterion Blu-ray collection, and it's great, but sometimes it's just a little too clean. Like, you can kind of see the strings, you can kind of start to see, kind of behind the curtain a little bit. But there's just something when you put it behind that VHS filter. I just absolutely love it. And so, yeah, when I created the series and I wanted to go found footage, I knew I wanted to set it in the past, and I wanted it to be kind of through tapes. So, like, this latest one I just put out, Living with Monsters, that one was kind of fun to do because one layer is having to make it like old, like 1950s film, and all that. And then I put a second layer over that to make it seem like a VHS tape of an old 1950s video. So it's a lot of fun. And just playing with those different eras, yeah, it's made me definitely start to dive back into my VHS tapes a little bit more.
So the project we're talking about is under your banner Lost Utopia Films, right?
Yep.
So what is your role in that? On the website, I saw that you are one of two people mainly behind that, correct?
Yeah. And that website, it's funny. I actually just took it off by YouTube because it's like 4 years outdated. But no, yeah. So Lost Utopia Films currently is just me. I was co-partner with my friend Luke, but he moved away. And he still makes movies on his own channel, and we both send Godzilla stuff back and forth. But yeah, currently right now the channel is just me, just kind of the captain of everything.
So where's the origins for Lost Utopia? Where does that come from?
Yeah, like the name or just in general?
Let's do both.
No, yeah. The name's funny, because it originally I wanted it to be Lost Paradise Films, but someone in Ireland took that. So I just looked up synonyms for paradise and utopia. That's really how I came up with it. I wish I had a deeper meaning behind the name, but that's really where it came from. And I started it in 2015. Yeah, 2015. And yeah, before that, like, I think my channel was called like Fear Films, or it was like Tarrell Studio. Like, I always had these different studios, but Lost Utopia is the one that I've been sticking with for like the last 10 years or so.
Okay. So why did you establish Lost Utopia Films?
Mainly just as a place where I could post my work. I also dived a little bit into kind of doing film tutorials and whatnot. I've slowed down on that just because time-wise they take a bit. But yeah, I kind of just wanted to have a place where you can kind of follow my journey, see me grow, and then hopefully if I get the time around to it, teach you how I did some of the stuff behind it.
Now, speaking of your journey, so, you've talked a little bit about how, when you were 11, that's kind of really when it started for you. Now, if I was correct in my research, you went to school for multimedia, correct?
Yep. Yeah. In college, after I did my gen eds, it was the college in my hometown. But I went there and I studied, they called it, I think, like digital media production. But yeah, I was in that program for like 2 years, I believe.
Gotcha. So how did going to school, because that is one of the big debates, I'm sure like, do you go to school for it, or do you go the Spielberg route and just say, I can't do this, and just kind of hope that eventually somebody finds you and you kind of wing it? How did that help you in your journey?
Yeah. I mean, just in my perspective, since I had already been doing stuff since I was 11, if I'm honest, the thing I got out of college the most, I think, is like the networking and connections. As far as like, like equipment or like, any of that stuff, like I was kind of already covered. Like my teacher bumped me past a class just to kind of get me to like, because like I kind of just already had the experience. But with that debate, I see pros and cons to both. I think if you have never picked up a camera, never worked with any equipment, anything like that. I think there's definitely benefits to film school to kind of get you that foundation. And like I said, the networking was really great. Like some of the people I have in my movies now are people I met in college. But, you know, at the same time, especially with YouTube, I don't know if I don't think it's required personally. There's so much. I mean, most of the stuff I learned off of Film Riot on YouTube. So it's like, I don't know if you don't have the money, I wouldn't at all feel discouraged from pursuing film. You can absolutely do a lot on your own. I would just say honestly, and this just goes for filmmaking across the board, I think the biggest superpower you can have, more than money, more than even the skill, honestly, is just time management. The older I get, I'm realizing it all really comes down to time. Like nothing really is impossible with time, but that said, you kind of have to, if you want stuff done in a reasonable time, you have to learn how to manage that time. So yeah, that's probably what I would say on that debate.
You know, I felt that personally. One of the running, I guess it's a gag at this point, is so on the podcast, me and my co-host, we always talk about like what movies have we watched, you know, what since the last recording, what have we watched, how has it changed our lives, you know, whatever it may be. And
Right.
in the last couple of recordings for me, it's been I have been too busy. I haven't watched a single movie. I've been out filming or editing or, you know, just doing my normal day job and just trying to get through it. So that's
no, it's I feel that for sure. It's like I just now finished that Gamera anime that came out, I think like last year. Like that's just how long it took me to finally get down to like watching it. So yeah, I feel so behind on my movie watching. Like younger me would be so disappointed.
And see, I think you can kind of relate to this. So like I buy movies like every week. And you know, they're on my shelves and eventually it's just they start racking up and it's like I've got like 40 hours of films. How am I supposed to, like, I have to take a whole week off of everything to do that. But if I did that, I'd be so far behind I'd never get caught up again.
Yeah, I'm starting to realize it's just a cycle you can never really break out of. Just yeah, I just try and watch what I can. Like my big glaring gap in my monster knowledge is like Ultraman. Like I have never seen anything Ultraman. I'd like to, but it's one of those things where there's just so much. It's like I don't know when or if I'll ever dive into that fully. You know.
Yeah. See, I started watching Ultraman like probably a decade ago. I had only watched the first one, just Ultraman. And then as time went on, eventually I watched Ultra 7 and Ultra Q, but it took like a couple years to watch just those three. And
right.
Since then I've watched most of the Showa era. I'm down to one more. It's Ultraman 80. It's the last show. And it's taken me like 2-3 years to get through it.
Oh man.
But Ultraman is kind of, because I mean there's like 35 shows and you know each of those shows have at least 20 episodes. It's like if you take on that you're climbing a mountain.
Exactly. And it's like if I get into that, do I need to get into Zone Fighter? Do I need to get, you know, into like all these other, it opens a whole barrel.
It's a snowball effect and then it just never
Exactly.
stops.
Yeah.
So talking about working, so one of the things that I envy about you is you're not only a filmmaker, you know, you direct, you edit, you write, I'm presuming.
Yeah.
But you animate. So was it through Peter Jackson's King Kong that you kind of wanted to begin animating?
Yeah, the animation thing is weird because I never really wanted to get into animation. Like my dream was always to do Godzilla stuff, but that would be like, you know, Hollywood, someone else would be taking care of all that stuff, you know? So I was always a little nervous with CGI. it wasn't until my Spider-Man fan film where I think I really kind of like dipped my toe in it, and then I was like, okay, let me see if I can try doing Godzilla. And yeah, I still don't. I mean, I personally don't call myself an animator because there's, people that like really, dive into that. For me, it's kind of just like I need it to tell the stories I want. But yeah, that I've only really been doing for probably like 4 years. So of my skills, that's kind of the newest one.
Gotcha. So I am illiterate when it comes to animating. So what is that like? Like, what's the process behind animating?
Yeah, it's pretty fun actually. It's very much kind of like playing with the action figures. Like it's very much just kind of stop motion. Like you kind of move, like each body part basically has some type of mechanism that you can rotate or grab, And so it's just doing like those little adjustments, going forward a few frames, doing it again, and it kind of will just kind of like blend it all together. And that's essentially kind of what the animation process is. It's kind of just like playing with toys or puppets. And yeah, it's fun.
Now, I watched your Gorgo animation breakdown, and I noticed that, and I noticed as I watched more of some of your other like animation breakdowns, you take moments in your animations to do visual references, for the lack of a better term, to other things. For Gorgo, you kind of threw up there that there's the shot of the Hanna-Barbera Godzilla that you kind of replicated. So what's the thought process behind, like this is a perfect moment to pay homage to this, or like how do you find those moments in your head and pluck them and bring them to your work?
Yeah. I'm always a big fan of mainly specifically with Godzilla, putting in something that like, even if it's just one person, I know they'll pick up on it, like, oh, I know what you did there. It's a bit of that, and I also I just have a lot of Godzilla shots just kind of stored in my head. And that's, I mean, in any type of like visual effect or animating, you always want some type of reference to work off of. You almost never really want to just work off of like just nothing unless you have experience and you can kind of build off that foundation. But yeah, for me, I have a Pinterest, and I have a Godzilla board on there that I think has like 4,000 different images. And so that's like a well I always go back to. And, like with Hanna-Barbera stuff, like that cartoon and the 90s Godzilla cartoon as well, those always have a special place in my heart because I loved those as a kid. So those I'm always just kind of trying to find an excuse to reference them in some way.
Now, you even did a recreation, I guess, for the lack of a better term, a recreation of the opening for the 98 show.
Yeah, that was a lot of fun. Yeah, that's one of those videos part of me kind of cringes at just because of how much I've grown since then. I always get that with my work. Like my stuff always has an expiration date for me before I like start to cringe at it. But yeah, that one was a lot of fun. I think I did that. That one I did pretty fast because I wanted to get it out in time for Godzilla's anniversary. But yeah, that's one of my videos I love going into the comments on, just because it's like, not only is it my fellow Godzilla fans, it's my fellow cartoon Godzilla fans. Like it's such a small group, I feel like. And so I love just trying to make something for those more niche groups within the Godzilla fandom.
Now, one of the most interesting things for that video you did, I thought, was your choice of characters. So how did you decide? Because it's not a one-to-one recreation. You do take creative liberties. How did you decide on what characters to include and what characters to bring in?
Yeah, it was kind of a mix of like, there's a lot of monsters from the series I'd love to have in it, but there's just not models for them, and I'm not a modeler. So it was a mix of that, and then also like, I always wanted to kind of see like some Toho monsters show up in that. So that's kind of where like Anguirus shows up. And yeah, it was kind of just like a mishmash, mainly just because I couldn't get access to all of those original monsters.
Okay, interesting. So, since we're talking about your animation here, how did you? Because this is how I really was stumbled upon to you specifically. I had, of course, seen your animations, your found footage animations circulating because everybody loves those. But you have had the privilege, and like you're the only person to have this, to be able to bring back Gorgo and Yongary for Titanic Creations. How did that happen?
Yeah. I think a few years ago when I first started posting my Godzilla tests, I came across the monsters, like the original monsters that Titanic Creations has.
Mm-hmm.
I was like, oh, are there any models of these guys? Like, these guys are cool. And so originally I was going to try and do some type of animation with those guys, but there were some issues with the models. But then a few months later, he hit me up. He's like, hey, do you want to do this Gorgo thing? I was like, heck yeah, I want to do Gorgo. Like, of course. So that's kind of how that relationship started. Yeah, those guys are awesome. That's been great.
So it's been kind of a hot topic because for all intents purposes, you have been able to, like, for both Gorgo and Yongary, like, they haven't shown up on screen since their debut, those specific characters. So how does that feel to, like, hear what? We're 60? Are we in 60 years later for those? We are. We're getting to 60 years for those characters. What is that like to be the one to, like, bring those characters back 60 years later?
Yeah, I mean, it's honestly a dream come true. Like, of all the projects I've done throughout my life, those are those ones that, like, really make my inner child happy. Just to be a part of that little piece of history. Because, yeah, I still vividly remember being in front of the TV, you know, checking those out. And, yeah, to be the one that kind of, like, helped shepherd it back in. I mean, it was surreal, really, honestly. Like, it's so cool. I still can't believe I did it.
So for those and all of your animations, they look very cinematic. How do you do that? Like, how do you work your magic?
Yeah, I mean, that part of that's just years of making stuff. You kind of just trying to, like, fine tune. My basic process is, like, I do all my stuff in Blender, and then I send it all to After Effects, where After Effects I've been using probably almost 10 years. So that one I'm very comfortable in. And yeah, there's a lot of tricks. If I had to, like, break it down into just, like, a few things I do, I'd say, like, mist, some type of, like, environment, like, I mean, I guess it depends on the scene, so I shouldn't say that. I'd say mist, putting, like, a slight glow over everything I've noticed kind of helps blend it all together. And then the color grade, I use this thing called Film Convert, which converts it into, like, basically color spaces that you would see in films and all that. And that kind of, all of that together really kind of helps blend it all together.
Gotcha. So you mentioned After Effects. So do you use Adobe? Because I use Adobe for all of my stuff.
Yeah,
okay.
Yeah. Premiere, After Effects. Yeah, those are my main ones.
Okay. So for me, kind of transitioning to your other animations, the ones that are kind of blowing up because of how amazing they are, the found footage ones. Where did that creative process begin?
That one originally, part of me is wondering if I should say this because I don't know if I'll use it in the future, but I'll say it anyways. Originally, I was going to do a found footage feature film called Escape from Monster Island, and it was basically going to be this group that crash lands on Monster Island, and as you can guess, they have to escape, and, you know, there's all these monsters and whatnot. So I kind of started as that, and I started doing the found footage tests that people, you know, started to get into. But then I kind of started to, like, I basically started to think bigger on, like, you know, what else could I really do with this? Because I really didn't expect as many people to be, you know, into that found footage stuff. So I kind of started to re-engineer it. And I'd say after I made the Griffin, I pretty much from that point kind of got the story figured out beginning to end. And yeah, I'm really excited to see how it unfolds, and what people think is really going on in the story.
Now, in one of your breakdowns, it's for your short film, The Spaceman.
Mm-hmm.
No, it's Top Secret. Top Secret. That's in your VFX tutorial, kind of tie in with that one. You mentioned Cloverfield for kind of the look of how you framed your monsters. Do you take a lot of influence from Cloverfield with like the found footage stuff and all that?
Yeah, no, I love Cloverfield so much, and I'd say that movie even inspires me outside of found footage stuff. Just the way they kind of frame the whole event as kind of like this classified thing that you're getting like a look at. Absolutely love that, and yeah, it's been a big inspiration. It's kind of been funny now watching behind the scenes of that movie and like the CGI process, because before I'd look at it and be like, that's cool, but I have no idea what they're doing. But now I can watch it and I can actually learn from it and kind of see like their process and how they made that movie. So yeah, it hasn't happened yet, but there definitely will be a video that is a big tribute to that movie.
So one of the characters that you used in the second Godzilla found footage video was a character called Kenira. So I did a brief search. I found a suit for it. What's the story behind that?
Yeah, it's honestly, the real story is I wanted to have Ebera, but there was not a model for him. So I was like, I found this crab model, and I basically looked up what the Japanese word for crab was, which is, and then as you know, every monster you just end it with "ra," like that's just basically you name a monster. And so that's essentially how Kanira came to be. And then I too also Googled it just to make sure I wasn't like obviously ripping off somebody, and I saw that suit, and that suit is actually really sick. I see that in a Godzilla movie. But yeah, really, that monster just came to be because I didn't have the sea monster. So
okay. So, you know, we've talked about your animations. I love film, and I'm really happy because your films are traditionally short films. Well, from your YouTube channel, they're all short films technically, but most of them fall into a category that I've mostly dabbled in, which is like the 6 minutes or less, kind of that short form of storytelling.
yeah.
So first I need to know the origins of Ghost Rider versus Catwoman. I love Ghost Rider. I gotta hear this story.
Yeah, that was my first movie ever, like full one that I did start to finish. And yeah, I just got my first camera, so I think this is like February 2007. And we literally that day went and saw the Nicolas Cage Ghost Rider, loved it, and we just went back home and we were like, all right, we're gonna make a movie. I don't honestly remember how Catwoman got put into the mix. I'm guessing my sister was a big fan of Halle Berry's Catwoman, so I can only imagine that's probably who she wanted to play, and it kind of just ended up Ghost Rider versus Catwoman. But yeah, that one's a throwback. That's one I always go back to if I need to like remember why I'm doing this, you know.
Well, I'm glad to hear you two are one of the fans of the Nick Cage Ghost Rider movie.
It's fun, yeah.
I love it. It's so fun.
Yeah.
So, where did you kind of decide? Now, I imagine you want to do more, but where did you kind of make the mental decision of I want to do short films, the like single digit runtime films?
Yeah, it was just definitely always, you know, you're kind of always pitched as a filmmaker like, oh, go make like your one big dream movie and that's going to be the thing. But I found I did like kind of a feature in between high school and college that no one saw, and I'll make sure they don't see it. But I kind of just realized that like you do gain a lot of experience, you know, making a feature, but it is a very long and exhausting process, and you have to really love that idea to be with it. long, as long as you want to. And so the Lost Utopia films, the short films, really, at the end of the day, as much as I love them, they're kind of like training or like stepping stones. Like they were kind of my way to dip my toes in different genres. A way I could work with, actors in the area I was interested in. And it all was very low stakes. I didn't have to worry about like, oh, is this going to be the one that gets me into Hollywood? Is this, are a bunch of people going to see this? Like, it's always just make a short one, move on to the next one, and just kind of keep gaining that experience. And I do eventually, obviously, want to chase the big feature, but that's kind of the end game of my journey. I'm kind of just trying to get as prepared as I possibly could be before that time. And so, yeah, the short films were kind of a really good way for me to get that experience.
I'm starting to realize that we might have a lot in common. So, for me, my short films, every time I work on a project, it's like, okay, so for this one, I really want to focus on sound design, like going out, recording audio, finding a way to mix it with other audio, edit it a little bit, design it, and create a very good sound mix for a short film. The one I'm working on right now, my main focus was, okay, framing. I wanted, how can I frame it right, and then color correction and color grading. How can you make a visually interesting film on top of my last one where I learned sound mixing and like creating just like each element of film, because film is, you got the visuals, you got the audio, you've got the performance themselves, you've got the stage, the set design. There's so many moving pieces that I love that you mentioned like stepping stones and kind of training, because like they're great, like great 3-week training programs, it could be longer, could be shorter, depends on how long you work on it, but it's a good way to develop your creative eye.
Definitely.
So.
Yeah, I think, and going back to your past question about like finding my own style, I think that was probably one of the biggest ways, was just trying out different short films, kind of figuring out what it is I like, what kind of stories I like to tell. Yeah, so that's definitely a big reason behind it. I also relate to, I did that same thing too, of like each one would kind of be like a different skill. Like the first short film I put out on Lost Utopia Films was this Bigfoot short film, and it has completely no dialogue. And the challenge I had for myself was like every sound effect in it, I was going to record separate, like just fully, just rebuild it from there. And it was exhausting. It took a long time, but it definitely taught me a lot about audio, and I further appreciated it for sure.
See, my last one I did that same thing, and the way I look at it is like, if you look at the history of film, I think of Italian filmmaking. For a long time, they shot it silent, and they would go back and they would do ADR, they would do Foley, like they would rebuild from the ground up the entire sound for all of their films.
Yeah.
And so it's kind of cool to think like, this was how it was done at one point. Like this was how a whole like country, like that was how they did film.
Yeah, I think it's super cool. And honestly, like, I think every filmmaker should try and just like get some type of knowledge on all those separate pieces of craft. Because like there is like a lot of technology now that can kind of help you. It streamlines the process. And I do think that's great. But I do think it is important to know, how these things are actually working and what it is they're actually doing. In case something goes wrong, you're not just completely lost,
And you kind of find a way to be able to articulate like what exactly you want from an actor or an editor or a sound designer or a composer, whatever the case may be. It does kind of help that line of communication stay open and constructive.
Yeah, no, absolutely. It's a lot easier to communicate something if you actually kind of know what you're talking about rather than just trying to, guess what you need to say to them. Definitely, yeah.
So out of curiosity, did you do in like high school or something, did you do theater or anything like that to get a grasp at all?
No, I wasn't a theater kid. There was a journalism class that I took, but I kind of cheated my way into it because they wanted us to do like some type of podcast video every 2 weeks. And I wanted to just do short films. But they wouldn't want me to do that. But they said I could do parodies. So I was like, okay. So like those 3 years of high school, I just made so many parodies. I have Godzilla parodies. All these different things. But what's cool about parodies is that it lets you kind of dip your toes into whatever that movie is, just trying to replicate it, kind of get a test it out. But yeah, that was really the only film related activity I did in high school.
Okay. So you mentioned kind of the end goal of eventually getting to work on full length feature films and whatnot. So what are kind of, for you, what is that kind of, that outline, that plan, like, is there a big project that you are working towards to kind of be like, okay, this is like the showcase of my work, this is my demo reel to an extent?
In a way, this Godzilla series, I'd say, is kind of that, especially like towards the end of it. Like there's going to be a lot more actors involved. There's a lot more live action that's going to be involved. So that's definitely one I'm hoping you can kind of look at as just like, oh, this guy is very passionate about, Godzilla, and, put the work in. Outside of that, though, I used to kind of have like a step-by-step plan and whatnot. But after the pandemic, I'm kind of like, I'll figure it out as I go. I don't have a solid plan right now.
So let's kind of dive into a little bit more of your Godzilla project. So it all started with Godzilla and the Griffin. So how did you, like, you created a short film with both American Godzillas fighting a scrapped American Godzilla villain. How did that come to be? What was that creative process?
Yeah. I mean, you hit the nail on the head. The whole concept I kind of had behind it was, having the two American Godzillas fight, the one that never was. That was always kind of the thing. I always, and similar with my Godzilla cartoon short, I always love trying to show some love to Zilla, just give him his moments and his highlights. And I always love the idea of him interacting with another Godzilla outside of just like fighting each other. So it originally, if I remember right, it was going to just be Zilla versus the Griffin. But once I kind of got that idea of like, what if he has backup? It kind of starts snowballing from there. And yeah, that one was kind of untraditional in how I usually would do it. Like usually I would, there's like a shot list, there's like a script, all that. This one was purely just coming up with shots and then kind of reverse engineering, like making a story out of that. It was a really weird process. I don't know if I'll do it that way again, but yeah, that was the process.
Was that the process on the second one as well, or was that one with like shot lists and the whole storyboards?
I had some shots already done because that one I started before I finished the Griffin, so I kind of had a little rough start, but then I did write out like a full script, and then from there I went a little more traditional. I still was coming up with like some shots like the week before I put it out, just like, oh, it'd be so good, I got to do it. So I still was a little messy with it, but I mean, it's fun. I don't mind it.
So I don't want to ask you a question that's too, like, I don't want to ask you to reveal much, but is there anything you can say to kind of explain where this project is going?
Yeah. I'll say that there's the story you have within the videos. But as you'll learn, there's also a background story. Like there is someone who's uploading these tapes, and there's kind of a big conspiracy running throughout the video. That's not very apparent yet, but I think once it's all said and done, you go back, you'll kind of see like where those seeds were planted.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it definitely is heading towards a climax. There is a final big bad at the end of it all, and yeah, I'm really excited to see how people react to the story as it rolls out.
So, as I think we're going to kind of transition into wrapping things up a little bit. I do want to talk about this. You are an award-winning filmmaker.
Oh yeah.
So what's the story behind that one?
Yeah. I mean, I've done film festivals with my work. I haven't done them as much the last few years, mainly because like these Godzilla projects, since it's copyright, a lot of festivals are kind of a little weird about it, so I kind of have to purely just do it on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, with my original work, I'm always trying to get into film festivals, especially in my area of Iowa. It's just a really good networking opportunity. And yeah, the awards are cool. I do like to tell filmmakers though, like if you get an award, it's not like you magically just become a better filmmaker. And same if you don't get an award, it's not like you decrease in skill or anything. They're cool, but like, yeah, I don't try and. There's some people that like really trying to chase those awards. I'm not one of them. I'm very honored and happy if I get one, but I just want people to watch my stuff, really.
So, what are some of your original films, your original works that you would recommend anybody go see?
Ooh, I'd say my last original one, I believe, is The Crooked Place. And that's a horror movie. I definitely would say that one. That's one of my favorites. I'd say if you liked the newest Godzilla video I did, I'd check out Top Secret, because that one was kind of like the predecessor to it. That's kind of where I first practiced kind of doing the old agent effects, and it has, like a giant gorilla monster in it and all that stuff. I'd say The Spaceman is one of my favorites. If I remember, it's probably one of my more straight up sci-fi ones. Yeah, I'll leave it at those three for now.
Now, for anybody listening, and I don't want to just say this to be like, oh, he's right here, like he's here talking to me, but like I didn't watch all of them, but I watched a handful of them, and I thought they were great.
Oh, thank you.
I love your style. I love the look. I love, like, for The Spaceman, I love the almost non-linear storytelling.
Yeah.
I thought that was really cool. I love that. Top Secret, the giant monster cameo was great, of course, but even outside of that, I loved. There's no dialogue in that one. If I'm remembering correctly, there's no dialogue. It's all through physical motions and body language.
Yeah.
And I thought that was genius. I love that.
Thank you.
And I mean, of course, I'm so happy that you did a great job with Yongary and Gorgo. I know some people in South Korea have been like, look at this really awesome like animation. Like this is the character that like we grew up on, and here he is, like he's back.
Yeah.
I'd love to see. I would personally love to see you like maybe one day. This is just a fanboy inside of me, like Titanic Creations working with these companies and like doing like a 50-minute animated special or something with the characters or something. I'd love to see you do something like that. It's really good.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, no, I mean, I love playing with the monsters. Honestly, sometimes I feel like I get them better than the human characters. Just because, I mean, I've grown up watching them for so long. But yeah, no, I'd absolutely love to.
So, as a filmmaker who is continuing his journey, I'm not going to say you're even to the halfway mark. I don't think you are. I think you are still on the closer end of the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
What suggestions, what encouragements, what recommendations would you give any upcoming filmmaker or animator, script writer? What would you say?
Yeah. One kind of similar to what I said earlier, time management really is a great skill. Because, I mean, if you don't have the time to do the work, like you're kind of stuck, you know? One thing I'd say that I don't hear a lot from modern filmmakers is if you can upload your stuff, if you're just starting, like brand new filmmaker, honestly, if you're planning on to upload to YouTube, I would keep it either private or don't go into the comments. Because there are a lot of really mean people online. And I feel like I've seen younger filmmakers put out stuff that they obviously, you know, don't have a lot of experience or whatever. And it manages to blow up and people just kind of tear them down. And I could see that being discouraging to people. So I think it's really important to kind of, if you're just starting, have a little phase of where you're only making your movies for yourself, your friends, your family, and purely because you enjoy it. If you start with the idea of like, I just want to get views, it's not going to turn out how you want. It's going to be very hard. And so, yeah, I'd say just try and protect your peace when it comes to your filmmaking. Again, especially if you're early, because it will get better. And you don't want to just have some random stranger online tell you suck. And then lastly, I would say just try and, if you're doing like live action filmmaking, try and create a little crew. You know, it can be friends, whatever, just kind of a little group that's, you know, into filmmaking, because that could really get you a long way. Like it definitely seems like a lot of my stuff is, you know, purely just me, but it couldn't have been done without like the support of my friends or my actors. So yeah, just kind of trying to get a nice tight knit group. I'd say is pretty vital to grow. Especially people, you want people that, you know, aren't mean, but obviously will tell you, you know, the truth, or if something's not working.
Mm-hmm.
That's a very valuable resource. So I'd say, yeah, those are probably like my three things.
So one other thing, and I ask this because I feel like I kind of have a similar situation. How does one go about building kind of that circle, that group of people in a place that isn't very well known for film, or isn't like one of those big film places?
Yeah, that can be tough. One way is like film festivals,
Mm-hmm.
which if the town doesn't have one, I've found a lot of people generally, if they're in the same state as you, they're kind of down to travel for you. So that's definitely one. Sometimes just kind of searching what's going on in your area. There's usually always somebody else making, you know, something of some sort, you know, but if even those don't really pan out, you know, but you got like friends, I'd say, you know, kind of show them the ropes a little bit, see if they're interested. And there's a lot of different ways in which creative routes, like if you have a friend that likes music, like, you know, there's someone to do your soundtrack. Yeah. So it can definitely be tough. And there's a long time where I didn't have that group, but I found like the more I started making stuff and the better it got, people kind of started to get interest. And I eventually got to a point where I didn't have to ask as many people to help out. They're just like, hey, I'll help you. And I'm like, sweet. So yeah, that's kind of a messy answer. And I myself am still trying to grow my crew as well. But yeah, just trying to find what's out there. That's probably it.
Okay. And then this is more of a personal question, but how does one get into the film festival circuit?
Yeah, Film Freeway is a great website because it tells you, you know, you can even like filter it down to just like genres, you know, like there's just horror film festivals, you know, stuff like that. I'd say if you're just start in some low risk festivals, like don't obviously right away jump to Sundance, or like, you know, do the smaller tier ones that are a little cheaper, just because like even if you don't, you know, win or anything, sometimes they'll give you feedback, or you can even ask for feedback, and that's really valuable because then you can know like, okay, this is what I need to do for the next one. Yeah, I'd also say doing a little research into what festivals you're submitting to, because there's some that are like really into genre stuff. There's some that are really only looking for dramas.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, it's a mix of just kind of, I'd say just like start small. And there's a lot of online film festivals too. You don't have to always travel out to them. So yeah, I'd say just kind of start small, submitting to stuff, and then from there, yeah, you kind of just keep going up.
Well, I learned a lot here, and I appreciate you coming on here and talking with me, getting to know a little bit more about the beginnings and kind of what's going on. You have a lot of stuff in the works. From what I've been able to gather, you're just beginning with your Godzilla series.
Yeah.
And it's only up from here. Like, it continues to get better and it continues to get more exciting.
Yeah.
So
I hope so. Definitely. But yeah, no, thank you so much for having me on. It's always good when you can talk some monsters with people.
So before we wrap things up here, I always want to make sure that the people who come on get to throw out some links, some places where the listeners can find you at. What are your best places for people to contact you or to look at your stuff or just enjoy what you do?
Yeah, the two I'd say, main one would be YouTube at Lost Utopia Films. That's where my work is. I'm trying to get better in the community tab about posting updates because I'll just go radio silent sometimes for like months. And then I'd say my Twitter at I am Tarrell. I've been taking some breaks from it just because Twitter can get a little crazy sometimes. But if you ever shoot me a message on there, I'll reply. I always love talking Godzilla on there. So, yeah, I'd say those two spots are where you can probably find me.
Awesome. Sweet. And with that, we're going to wrap up this interview. Thank you so much for coming on. I've really enjoyed just hearing you talk about this stuff. It's been a lot of fun, and I'm sure everybody listening is going to enjoy it as well. So thank you so much.
Yeah, no, thank you for the opportunity.
Well, hello. I'm Elijah, and I have a Kaiju and Tokusatsu problem. Joking aside, I am Elijah Thomas. I am part of the rotating hosts for Monsters with Attitude. You can check us out on YouTube, where we do monthly live streams talking kaiju entertainment. You can also head over to Facebook and join our Facebook group. It's a great place to talk with like-minded people. I'm also a writer. I've written for GodzillaMovies.com and in Kaiju Ramen Magazine. Currently, I write for Kaiju United. My writing has also been featured in the book Giant Bug Cinema, a Monster Kid's Guide from Bear Manor Media, where I wrote about Ghidra, the three-headed monster. I am also a filmmaker and YouTuber. You can check out my stuff on my YouTube channel, ET13 Productions, where you can see some of my short films and my older YouTube videos, along with a playlist that features all of my appearances on YouTube. I do plan on getting some new videos out soon, and my short films, so definitely check that out. This is where I don't have a script yet, but as I mentioned at the top of the show, I also contributed an audio commentary and bonus features for SRS Cinema's release of Yuzo, The Biggest Battle in Tokyo. So definitely check that out on srscinema.com, where you can order the Blu-ray. I also helped license the character Yongary for Titanic Creations. I also appeared in a kaiju movie, little-known film called Zillafoot from 2021. I made a brief cameo in the film as Skywatcher number 2. It's got a rating of 3.7 out of 10 on IMDb, so you know it's gotta be peak cinema. So if you want to watch more kaiju, you can buy the Blu-ray on srscinema.com or the DVD from any major online retailer. Or just watch it for free on Tubi with ads or on Prime. You can also check out my action figure photography on my Instagram at et13_productions and my ex, the artist formerly known as Twitter, thanks Danny, at the same handle. And as for the podcast, don't forget to rate us on iTunes. That boosts our ratings and helps us get recommended to more people just like you. If you don't have an Apple device, which I don't blame you, I don't actually. That's a lie because I'm literally using a MacBook right now. But you can rate us on Spotify. If you want to stay up to date with all things Kaiju Conversation related, follow us on Twitter at KAIJU_CONVERS. If you don't have Twitter, you can follow us on Instagram or like us on Facebook at the same handle. If you're like me before podcasting and you don't have any social media, lucky you. You can email us at kaijuconversation@gmail.com, all lowercase, all one word, you know the drill. And as always, we'll read your reviews on air for everyone to hear. We also have a Teespring store. Eventually we'll have original artwork on there, but until then you can sport our awesome logo on a t-shirt or maybe even a coffee mug. If you'd like to chat with us, check out our Discord server full of others that have similar interests to you. It's a great place, great community full of great people. Don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel and hit the bell so you can be notified anytime we upload a video. We sometimes post exclusive to the channel like bloopers or for episodes or minisodes talking about news or other subjects. We also have an interview with Mechagodzilla designer Jared Kerchevsky on the channel. I definitely butchered his name. I'm so sorry. And a huge thanks to Rex for editing all of these episodes and all the other content we upload. His links can be found below. Along with Rex, we'd like to give a huge thanks and shout out to Danny DiManna of the Godzilla Novelization Project for his amazing vocals on our theme song. You can support him by following him on Twitter at Danzilla93_GNP or visit his website, GodzillaNovelizationProject.com. And a huge thanks to Gretton Conwell from the podcast Giant Monster BS for composing the music for our theme song. You can support him by following the podcast on Twitter at Giant Monster BS or on any podcast platform under the name Giant Monster BS. And with that, we're going to wrap things up here. So thank you guys so much for listening. It is fun to be back in Kawasaki month. It's going to be a great month. We have a lot lined up, a lot of good stuff to talk about. So thank you guys. And as always, please remember, life's too short to not talk big. Bye, guys.
We are set, we are in debt. There's nothing to sweat. Life's too short now, baby. And not too big now, baby. Conversation. His name's Elijah, baby. And also Rex now, baby. We love those kaiju, baby. And you will too now.